Hello there, it's Maggie the Cheshire Crafter here. A few weeks ago I started this project with a few jelly rolls and I called it the Busy Bee Patchwork Throw, and I'm going to finish it this weekend. I've had a holiday in between and I've finished a few other projects in between. Quilting is simply the process of joining together layers of fabric. The first way I'm going to quilt is very simple. I could quilt in the ditch, but I'm not. I'm going to quilt next to my seam lines and down the seams that I've created around the square. Where I added broidery and glay fabric, I really didn't want to flatten that fabric with free motion quilting or a square design. So I'm using something different. So this is the quilt topper as I left it. As you remember, we did a central diamond using Jellyroll strips, and then I used applique in certain areas. I added a chenille border. Remember, this will fray. And then I added a trim. So this is going to go under. This is going to go folded under. I'm at the point now where I need to do a quilt sandwich. This measures 41 by 53, approximately 41 by 53. And my quilt sandwich is going to be the polyester soft feel. For quilting, I'm going to use this polyester soft feel wadding. And I'm going to use my backing using this vintage cotton repeat, so that there's some cohesion between the front and the back. To see how I made my quilt sandwich, I'm going to refer back to the Christmas Rose and Holly Patchwork Throw, because I'm going to use the same principle here as there. I'm going to do that and then show you what it looks like when I've done it. I've got it on my bed so I can work around 3 sides and I can have it flat. This is probably the biggest area that I've got, and I'm going to pin it using my trusty basting pins. There, it's pinned. My tips here are: keep your work as flat as you can. If you've got the opportunity of using 2 people, do that. Use lots of pins. Make sure that you're pulling flat your reverse backing piece. Make sure you have excess backing and wadding to the topper on all sides. I've got about 2 inches spare on all sides. And don't pin your new quilt to your duvet. Right, let's take it to the machine. So I've loaded up my cotton and my bobbin, and I'm starting with my walking foot in the middle of the quilt, and I'm going to stitch either side of this line down here. The walking foot will help take the fabric through the top at the same speed as the bottom, and take this slowly. Accuracy here and getting a parallel line is more important than speed. I'm using both hands to guide the fabric through. Some people use quilter's gloves at this point. I actually like to feel the fabric beneath my fingers and I also can feel the sewing machine beneath, because that curve really helps me guide that fabric through and make sure that it's flat. At the end of the row, I'm leaving my threads loose because I will tie these off on the underside later. As I'm sewing, I'm mindful that I mind these pins. There are a few times I've actually moved the pins. I neither want to break a needle or the walking foot. And the other thing is, I'm mindful of what pattern I'm creating on the reverse. And as you can see, I'm actually sewing up to, let's see, this is vertically until I meet a horizontal line. And this will generate the same pattern on the reverse. And then I'll go round the square, and then we'll take a look and see what this looks like on reverse before I do anything else. So, still working on the principle of working from quilting from the middle outwards. I'm not going to quilt this section. I'm going to come back and do that by hand. I'll show you that later. Still with the walking foot, what I am going to do is I'm going to secure on the borders. So on the outside edge, I'm going to go over the tram lines and do tram line one here and one here. This is all straight but parallel stitching. And then I'm going to trim, and then I'm going to do one on just on the inside of the trim. Likewise, I'm going to do the same on the header and the footer, but I'm going to leave the header section and the footer section unquilted. There's going to be a big gap there. Likewise, there is around this square, and I'm going to quilt those by hand, not on the machine. Yes, I'm happy with how that turned out. Now, while I've got my fabric in this orientation, I've gone back on this same piece of fabric, so I'm just working down the horizontal line, and because it's a walking foot, I can use that same principle. I just need to move that over slightly, don't I? Just move that over slightly, because I need to get now this edge, it's the same distance away as this one was, against this stitch line. And if I use that as a guide, I should get the same distance here with my needle line as I did this side. So I've sewn just inside the line where the trimming meets the topper. And this now is the last of my machine stitching. The rest of it is going to be completed by hand. Let's see what this looks like now on the back. I think this is going to be difficult for you to see. I've put it on the bed again. What I want to do is to make sure I've captured every edge in. I want to see what my design looks around the middle. Can you see that? Can you see that diamond shape that we created in the middle? By the time I tie my loose ends in, that'll look great. I've got squares. I've got my edges overlapping. They look a little bit wonky, but I think that's the pull of the bed. What I've got here now is around about 3 inches between these lines. The big areas that are missing on the back are these triangle shapes outside the diamond here, and the header and the footer. As you can see, there's about 6 inches in depth there that I've got to fill in. I've left my pins in place. I haven't trimmed anything off yet. And I'm going to show you now how I'm going to quilt this section. So on the front, that'll be these triangles and the header and the footer that I've got here, which are appliqued and vintage white. Now, the reason that I haven't stitched this on the machine is I don't want to flatten all this beautiful broderie anglais. So you'll see I haven't even stitched the edge. I haven't stitched any of the broderie anglais with the machine stitching. I've stitched outside of it so that I don't flatten any of it. And what I want to do now is, although I want to quilt it, I want to enhance the look of that section. And this is how I'm going to do it. So I'm going to use this tool and I'm going to cover some plastic buttons. This is self-covering plastic buttons. And in the UK, these tools are made by Hemline or Prym. I buy the buttons like this in packs of 100, and that makes these 15mm buttons, about 15p each. And what I do is I take a template, I create a template, and then I cut the fabric. Obviously I'm using spare fabric that I had from the dress here. I've got the colour, I've got the broderie anglais, and I've cut round the template as a guide, and I'm going to put the fabric right side down into the appropriate buttonhole, and then I'm going to push the button down right deep in there. Then I'm going to take the ratchet, as you can see, let's see if I can get that in camera. You see that has a rough side. The rough side goes down to grab the fabric, and if you push it down with the tool, you get the perfect fabric covered button to match your project. And I'm going to make about 56 of these. When trimming, I've got my line on the stitch line at 1 inch, and I'm going to trim. This will give me a 3/4 inch edge, and I'm going to cut there. So my trimming is now pinned, ready for me to sew it tonight using a slip stitch. And what I'm doing is I'm scattering the buttons on the broderie anglais section, and then I'm going to note with this erasable ink pen. You see that? Erasable ink pen. I'm just going to put a dot where I want them to go. And what I'm trying to do is put the ones with some colour on a plain white section, and those that have got more white in them on the coloured section, so that they'll really show up. And I'm just going to stitch those on by hand. I've done it in the triangles in the centre, and I'm going to do it on the header and the footer. And one place I'm not going to do it is on the applique where the bees feature. So here's my final quilt. It's very colourful, it's soft, it's warm. It's quilted in 2 ways. It's got plenty of interest around and about the quilt, and it's very, very soft and likeable. There's something very special about hand finishing a project before you gift it, and I think it makes it even more personal. I really enjoyed making this, and I hope that she enjoys receiving this and using it for years to come. This is Maggie, the Cheshire Crafter, saying bye for now. Come back and see me soon, won't you? Bye then.